Hello and welcome back to Parenting Unpacked. You're here with Dr. Kristen Summer and
Dr. Siobhan Kennedy Costantini. Hello, how are we?
I'm good. Sorry for the delay. We never usually
You didn't
talk
warn
about it.
me.
I'm sorry. I know. I'm in a funny brain space today. But anyways, fair warning, if you hear little clicks like this, it's because I am currently using a fidget. It stops me from destroying my body so that I can stim in peace. Anyways.
Nice. We like not destruction. How do you usually stim? I know how you stim with the fidget, but how do you destroy your body? Finger picking?
I pull the skin off of my lips when I'm not around other people for some reason, except for my husband. Pull the skin off of my fingers when I'm talking to people.
Sure.
I know it's weird, but we're working
And painful, presumably.
Yeah, it's pretty uncomfortable. I will give you that. If you actually look close enough in my videos on like TikTok and Instagram, you'll notice that like you'll always see like a mark in the same spot on my lips. That seems to be my spot. But anyways, we're working on it. We're using fidgets, currently using an infinity cube.
Totally. I mean, people don't do things for no reason. So whilst it might be physically uncomfortable, it's emotionally and cognitively very comfortable.
Absolutely. Oh, and quick like podcast plug for someone else, given that I'm really getting into my neurodivergent season of thriving. There's a podcast called Neurodivergent Women Podcast, and it's hosted by a neurodivergent clinical psych. And I think they're based in Brisbane. They were presenting at the Compassion Symposium.
What's their name?
I don't remember. I just know the name of the pod.
That's all right.
Just started listening.
There we go. They'll be clicking in the background. Apologies, people. Neurodivergent Women Podcast.
Anyways, while Siobhan is looking that up, I'm going to do Fun Fact Friday because right before jumping on this call, I was just like randomly, I was actually doing research for this podcast episode, obviously, because Siobhan said, let's talk about regressions. She didn't actually mean the regressions. I thought, well, sort of did. I was looking for like the evidence on 4-month sleep regressions, which, hey, there's none. But anyways, I ended up in like, sleep training research kind of stuff. And I stumbled across a paper from 2016, which I think I've read before, but like I read it again. It's from Flinders University, or at least the main author is, the lead author is Michael Gratizar. I don't know. Anyways, basically in this study, they took, a small sample of kids, so 43 infants, and they put them into 3 different conditions. There was a control condition where they just received education on infant sleep. There was the graduated extinction method, which I think is FERBA, which is where you leave the baby to cry for progressively longer increments. Or there was bedtime fading, which basically bedtime fading is where you limit the baby's opportunity for sleep at night by delaying their bedtime by 15 minutes each night until you find the right combination where it like reduces the like time it takes to go to sleep and things like that. So it's considered a gentle version of sleep adjustments because there is no crying. You literally just keep your baby up longer, which might make some of you scream internally if you've been told that, babies need to go to sleep early or they'll get overtired. Anyways, it's so totally beside the point. What this study did was it had actigraphy, which means they had an objective measure of how much babies slept and woke. They also took a diary of from the parents. So the parents would write out how often their baby woke, how long it took to put them to sleep, how long they slept for, whether they woke up soon after waking. They also took saliva to get cortisol measures. Cortisol is stress. And I think that's it. Oh yeah. And they did attachment. So they took the strange situation test, which tells you, what type of attachment your child has. And I guess they looked at whether it changed. And what they found, and this is really funny. I was, kind of complaining to Siobhan about this, right before it started. So they found that for the actigraphy, so that's your objective measure of sleep, all of the babies in all of the conditions were similar in how long they woke, how frequently they woke, whether they took a long time or a short time to go to sleep, and all of these things. There was no difference between the conditions on the objective sleep measure. So that's the one that actually shows what a baby is doing. On the subjective sleep measure, which is the one where the parents reported it, they found a whole bunch of differences with like lots of support for the graduated extinction, a little bit of support for the bedtime fading, and a little bit of support for the sleep education group. Now, the irony is when they wrote in the abstract about what this study found, they used all of their findings from the sleep diaries and kind of presented it as like what the study found and its main impact, saying that, you know, graduated extinction and bedtime fading are both very effective measures for changing infant sleep. But that's not entirely true. Actually, it's not true at all, because that's just changing parents' perceptions of sleep, because the actigraphy showed no changes, which tells us that objectively the infants didn't really change the way they slept throughout this intervention period, or rather they all changed, or maybe they all got better equivalently. It's a bit unclear in the paper. It does look like they all got a little bit better, but
which makes sense in terms of development, right? Like on average,
it could just be development. It could just be standard development, because it's over a period of time. I think it's like over a period of 3 months. So you would expect them to get like progressively better. And these babies were 6 to 16 months as well. That's like a really key thing here. Most research done on children's sleep or infant sleep is done after 6 months of age. I don't think you're really meant to sleep train a baby under 6 months.
Wow. No, that's also a massive like age gap. Like, there's so much happening development
huge range
in 6 and 16 months. So
and there's like less than 15 kids per condition. Like this is tiny numbers.
And this was in 2016. I'm amazed it got published.
Yeah, I mean, the way they wrote it makes it sound really impressive, and it got published in pediatrics, which is crazy as well. It's also really hard for me to get. I had to do like the sneaky scientist thing and go somewhere that I definitely don't use to get it.
So you couldn't even get it through your institution?
No, it said I didn't have access to it, and I was trying to access it through like my institution's like Wi-Fi as well. So like I can get it. But anyways, so that's my Fun Fact Friday. Essentially, education on infant sleep, bedtime fading, which includes no crying, and it's just about making your kids stay up later, and graduated extinction all lead to the same outcome, and that is, you know, potentially just normal development increases, because your education control is not a control.
And no, that's, as you were describing the study, I realized they don't actually have a control.
I know.
Because particularly when it's when the measure that they're using is parent reported sleep, and as we know, like sleep in the West is a highly charged topic for parents. Every time, like when you have a baby, every time you see anyone, the question is, how are they sleeping? Whether it's a well-meaning question or a judgmental question, it can be both. Neither. No, usually is one or the other, but like, it's a charged question, and therefore it's a charged topic and highly polarized. Anyway, so yeah, you can't trust parent sleep reports. However, it is important to understand that it's a component. Infant sleep is much more about how parents feel about it than the infant sleeping themselves. There's one thing that I think is so interesting is like, and you will hear so many parents place, is that one version of a bad night's sleep is a dream situation. In mothers groups, so many times people are like, oh, they woke 3 times last night. I'm like, I would kill for a baby that only woke 3 times. But that's not to say that those mums weren't actually struggling, because you get used to what you're experiencing very quickly. So anyway, yes, perception and your experience of a situation is just as important as the situation itself, but not when it comes to research. You can't claim them as comparable.
Definitely. Now, I think I never really got around to reading the cortisol findings, but I don't think that they were very strong at all. It didn't sound like they were very strong in the abstract either. There wasn't any change in attachment styles, which, you know, probably the strange situation isn't the most spectacular way to measure it, because you're taking the child out and putting them in a really weird place. So we don't really know if attachment changed, also whether it changed over a 3-month period. Like that might be too short a period of time. Although,
yeah, I mean, attachments are it's dynamic, but it's also a long game situation. Like it's a pattern of behavior rather than a consistent, rather than individual instances. And that's a pretty supported finding, is that sleep training in general doesn't affect the attachment. However, depending on a child and their temperament and your temperament, it could do. So it's not a catch-all. But actually, that's a perfect segue. I'll share my Fun Fact Friday at the end. But it's a perfect segue to what I wanted to talk about today, which is how science is communicated. So obviously what we do, we on our various platforms communicate science. We communicate what we know from our own study, from our own research, and from our decades of learning about all this stuff, and then reading and getting on top of the new stuff, is that science communication is a really difficult thing to do because of the following reasons. Scientists take complicated, particularly like life sciences or psychology, when we're looking at people, people are messy. The way they behave, the way we do things, why we do things, our biology, our psychology, our experience of the world, it's messy and it's not easily quantifiable, which is, for example, like anytime I do a personality test, like a fun BuzzFeed article, I never get the same result. No one does, because who we are on a given day is different to who we are tomorrow versus who we are like in 2 weeks' time.
Yes.
We're complicated, highly variable creatures. And so when psychology research or medical research tries to examine people, that's the reason we need such big sample sizes, because you can't study 3 people and assume that's what humans do. Usually we need to be studying thousands and thousands of people in a perfect world. But even then, so in order to understand the individual, you have to study thousands and thousands of people. But by studying thousands and thousands of people, you lose the individual variation. So scientists take really complex things, do a ginormous, big picture view of things, and then sometimes, depending on their quality of writing and ability to have perspective, summarize their findings and try to identify how it applies to the population. So maybe they're studying people with autism, and they're studying, how does this thing I've found about this subgroup of people with autism relate to all people with autism? But every single person who has autism is an individual with their own unique characteristics. So whilst the findings might indicate this general group of people did X, Y, and Z, it doesn't mean that you as an individual who has autism does X, Y, and Z. So that's one part of the problem. You take big, complicated people, big groups of complicated people, and you try to simplify it into an easily digestible story or research paper. Then journalists get involved. And then it becomes even more problematic because, understandably, they have to simplify what happened so that people can understand it. And then the people who understand it take it and run rampant by telling everyone what's going on. So sleep regressions, which Kristen started talking about at the beginning, is probably a perfect example of the way this science works. So to simplify a very long story, basically there's these researchers from the Netherlands who their research was, they were looking at mother-infant primates, and they observed over decades that chimpanzee infants tended to follow patterns of developmental bursts and then regressions, and that this affected their mood, their sleep. So they had these stormy periods or these kind of more relaxed weeks. Then they were curious. So it was a husband-wife pair of researchers who studied primates. They were curious whether this held for humans, because we're primates too. And they found that it kind of matched. Then they wrote a book in the 90s, which became very popular in the 2000s. And then this book is called the WonderWeeks, and it describes these bursts of development and these periods of regression. And then sleep trainers went wild and described sleep regressions and how to get through them or get over them. And the thing is, originally, in terms of when it comes to like primate research, I've been to those labs. There's one in Texas, Bastrop, Texas, just outside of Austin. And the people that work there are wonderful and very kind, but it's literally like monkeys in a cage. It's like a battery hen farm. Yeah. It's a contrived situation. It's not natural. The lights get turned, like the ginormously bright lights get turned on and off at different times. They get fed through a hole. Like it's not a natural situation for monkeys. So, or chimpanzees or whatever the situation is. So it's supremely contrived data anyway. And then you're just going, oh yeah, it's pretty similar in humans. So that like, it's just taking like nuance and complexity and individuality and variance and oversimplifying it, turning it into a book and further oversimplifying it for general consumption. And then people who don't have scientific background or understanding go, this is what people do. This is what all babies do and what they should and shouldn't do. And then the mum at the park tells you that your baby's going through a sleep regression and you're doing it all wrong. Because she read a book.
Like my awkward mums group.
It
videos.
Does, doesn't it? It really does. And it's just this like wild oversimplification of really complex biological systems.
Yeah.
And it drives me bananas.
Like, I get it. I get why
totally.
people are driven to do it. They like when you have an infant, there is so much chaos, so much randomness. You don't know when anything's going to end, and you just want something to tell you when it will end or when it will change or when it will get better. And so like we already know, I talk about this on the pod like far too frequently, but humans are very averse to randomness and we search for meaning in everything, even when there is no meaning. Like the fact that some children just don't sleep like others do. And
but it's even more random than that. Like that's why we see patterns in the clouds. There's no patterns in the clouds, but because humans are so desperate for meaning and understanding. And that's also one of our superpowers, right? It's why we're so great at telling stories and creating skyscrapers and cities and all these wonderful things, is that we create order out of chaos, or at least we are so desperate to try. So when we see a face in the clouds, it's not because there's a face in the clouds. It's because our brain seeks to make patterns or to understand random chaos. And like you say, I'm exactly the same. Like I downloaded these apps. I looked into all this stuff. I followed this stuff because it's exactly right. Not only as a parent of a newborn or a child in general, let's be honest, you have no idea what's going on. Yeah. And you are desperate to try and do the very best for this child. And even if you have wonderfully supportive people in your life who are like, just go with the flow, read their cues, you're there going, how the hell am I supposed to do that? I don't know what their cues are. I have no idea what's going on. And so you're just trying to find something, anything.
Yeah. Like, in contrast to you, I downloaded the WonderWeeks and then immediately couldn't use it because I had a chaos child. I had a child that literally like could not nail down. Everything was chaos. Like, you know how, like I was talking about this on one of my videos I was recording this morning. You know how there's like those bedtime routines where it's like bath and like baby massage and like there's science behind baby massage apparently. And then like, you give them a bottle and then you read them a book and they go to sleep, or like you feed them to sleep, whatever. My chaos child would scream from the moment she got out of the bath until there was a nipple in her mouth. And that was exactly
us.
It didn't matter what latency there was, so how long it took for me to get a nipple in her mouth or whether I was present. We made like for probably a couple of months, I made my husband take her from the bath, get her dressed and get her ready for bed. And then I would feed her, or we changed the time. We did so many things. She just screamed for about a year from the moment we took her out of the bath until she went to sleep.
Amazing. That is that's exactly how we went. We would actually, we changed it a little bit depending on, but yeah, that's exactly right. Hopped out of the bath, screamed. Then Alex would take Timo and I would rush to get dry because I would bath with him because he needed someone to be touching him at all times. I would rush, get dry, get clothed, try to get everything ready, and then run into the room while I could hear the screaming the whole time, of course. Yeah. And then for a little while, Alex bathed him once he started tolerating someone else. And then I would rush madly to get everything ready. Totally. Sorry, I don't quite know how that relates apart from
it does
sharing
in
that.
Fact, Well, no, it does in the fact that with WonderWeeks is prescriptive recommendations for what you should do to get your baby to do X, Y, and Z. WonderWeeks is a little less prescriptive in terms of like, you should do this to make your baby do this. They're more like, your baby's probably doing this right now. They're probably in a stormy period. They're coming up to a sunny period. And like that can be really comforting to some parents. I don't think I've really heard much about WonderWeeks causing too much anxiety. But what
That's
I
so
do
true.
know,
Yeah.
what I do know causes a lot of anxiety is sleep routines or the bed, bath, bed routine. No, bath, bed, bottle, boob, whatever. Oh my God. Anyway, so where it's relevant is the fact that like in my, you know, postnatal like anxiety and depression brain, but I think this is common to other parents as well that didn't have the same mental health challenges we did. I was thinking, oh my God, I'm never going to be able to have this nice, calm, quiet bedtime that everyone else seems to have with my baby. And I just remember thinking that constantly. I was never going to have this nice, peaceful, beautiful routine like everyone else seems to have. Like it's always going to be screaming and miserable and anxious. And like, I mean, now we have that beautiful, peaceful routine. Like now we all jump into bed and read a book and she flutters her eyes closed and goes to sleep. But that took 3 fucking years, a whole lot of anxiety and never, ever being able to get a single prescriptive routine that's meant to work because humans are variable. Not all babies love a massage. Actually, I think I tried it and she hated it. And yeah, it just doesn't work for all kids. And I think that's the idea of this, right?
Absolutely. Like that's exactly the idea, is that these well-meaning like research papers, and I do believe that it is well-meaning.
Oh, absolutely.
Gets oversimplified and then re-oversimplified and then re-oversimplified into a prescriptive babies do X, and if your baby's not doing X, then there's something wrong with you or them or both, which is messed up. It's not helpful. And I, like you said just before, I agree. Like the WonderWeeks isn't like that, which is great. But sometimes people interpret the WonderWeeks, and that's why I don't know if this was on the recording, but earlier we were talking about how there's very limited research behind sleep regressions.
There's no research.
There's hardly any. Like the research behind the WonderWeeks, which is like good quality stuff, apart from the obvious challenges when it comes to monkeys, is just some of the, like, it's useful to study primates to understand human behavior, but it's not the be all and end all. But yeah, sleep regressions, it's not an accepted term in the sleep research field. It's not studied, and really it's quite amusing that sleep regressions is actually like kind of a conflated issue, where I don't think the WonderWeeks even talks about it that much. They just talk about they talk about regressions, which is more the stormy periods, which is the language they tend to use, is more just your child's going through stuff, and they might sleep might be difficult, life might be difficult, they might be grumpy. So almost exclusively, the 4-month sleep regression is different, but almost exclusively, quote unquote, sleep regressions have nothing to do with sleep. It's all to do with development. It's times when extreme bouts of learning happens, whether that's cognitive or motor learning is happening, and that sleep is bad sleep, quote unquote bad sleep, is a side effect. So it's that your baby's brain, their development is on fire and their sleep goes to shit. Yeah. And it's like exactly the same with us as adults.
It's like that Alison Gopnik quote. It's my favorite quote ever. She's like, being in a baby's brain is like being in Paris for the first time in love after 3 shots of coffee. It's a wonderful way to be, but it does tend to leave you crying at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Exactly.
My favorite quote. And that's exactly what's happening in your baby's brain. And it's not just like sleep regressions kind of just are describing a phenomenon where babies just either don't want to sleep because they're practicing skills and they're having a lot of fun doing it, or they've just learnt that like, you can be separated from them, although I'm not sure if that one's really a solid one. But anyways, they're learning new things and it's changing whether they want to sleep. It's also like disturbing their sleep if they're a bit overwhelmed or tired.
How easy it is to get to sleep. How well did you sleep the night before your wedding?
That's a great question. I don't remember because I don't remember sleep much pre-child. But I
Yeah,
also
sure.
had a meltdown / panic attack on my wedding day that lasted 5 hours. So
Yeah.
probably
I
not
mean,
well.
look, the night before my wedding, I didn't sleep at all because I was just too
Oh,
excited. I was too
yeah,
pumped.
solid effort.
And
I was
I
not.
mean, well, yes, for different reasons. But like, it's exactly like it's anytime there's a new or exciting thing happen or on holiday, you tend not to, you sleep differently. Like anytime
Yeah.
your brain is experiencing like big differences. And when it comes to babies and development,
Yeah.
their difference and like big change is their normal.
Yeah, it's constant. Oh.
So I think that's the main message that we're trying to get across is that things are always more complex than they seem, that sleep is complicated, and that however you and your baby make it happen is a-okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I think sleep is such a big one because people like to pathologize it. They're like, "Oh, your baby isn't sleeping well for like a week, therefore you must train them to make them sleep better so that the whole family functions better." But like a lot of it comes down to perspective. If you think your baby's sleeping normally, you're going to be less stressed. And if you're less stressed, well, you're not as tired, and then all of a sudden sleep deprivation isn't actually a problem and everyone's happy. And it's just
I mean, yeah, it's such a hugely complex issue. And no doubt it's got a lot to do with women entering the workforce in the 80s. Like if both parents are working, then both parents need sleep in order to function. And then some, I mean, we pathologize sleep in general. Like how often do we,
Yeah.
like any adult, if you're not getting 8 hours of sleep a day, it's a disaster.
Yeah.
If you're sleeping too much, it's a disaster. Like there's not really an accepting nature of the fact that some days we sleep 6 hours, some days we sleep not. Like that there's the variation.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I need to kind of touch on something that's a very controversial thing here because we have talked about sleep a lot in this episode. And Siobhan, I don't know, did you miss it or were you a keen observer like I was when the sleep trainer live streamed sleep training a 4-month corrected infant in her walk-in robe while her family went to Disneyland?
I didn't catch it, thank goodness, but I did catch the aftermath. I saw
that's
it
what I
from
thought.
Michelle from At Babies and Brains.
Yes.
I saw her when she first started talking about her stories, and I actually was chatting to Caitlin Klimmer, who's also a sleep consultant, who's a gentle attachment informed sleep consultant on Instagram. I reached out to her and I'm just like, what the actual fuck? What? Like like you, I'm not anti-sleep training in and of itself. I think what you shared the other day is that it should be considered a medical intervention in serious condition, like serious situations where it's required for the health and safety of the family. But like to drop your child off with a stranger, apparently they were family friends, but to your child, they're a stranger, to drop them off while you and the rest of your family goes to Disneyland?
Well, no, we're not shaming the parents, Siobhan. Hold on. Let me get some context.
Yes, fine.
Let me get some context into this because I think people might be missing a lot of information. So,
Sure.
Over the end of last week, I think it wasn't the weekend, it was like the end of last week, a very large sleep account with 300,000 followers went private. And after they went private, they proceeded to live document the sleep training of an infant that was placed in their care, I think by a friend, you're right. I did see that, who was born 5 weeks premature. So the infant was 5 months old and then was born 5 weeks premature. So it wasn't even quite 4 months corrected, I think. And I don't know, the child was placed into a walk-in robe and was sleep trained using, I want to say Ferber, like your graduated extinction, not your cry it out. And the entire time, the sleep trainer was using the child's experience of being sleep trained by a strange person in a strange environment while the parent was away to sell her product. And I think this is the major issue here because what they're doing is minor exploitation in marketing. So she had 300,000 followers when she went private, And there are rules when it comes to marketing. Some television channels don't get anywhere near 300,000 viewers. And yet this woman was exploiting a baby and broadcasting what could be trauma. We don't know. But it's very traumatic when you're in a strange place or a strange location and someone isn't coming to you when you cry for them. Because this is a self-preservation instinct for this baby. They would imagine if you were dropped off somewhere with someone strange, and you can think about that concept yourself. But yeah, the biggest issue here, like, we're not going to shame the parents for sleep training or going to Disneyland or anything like that, because that family friend is a family friend of a sleep trainer who they trust, and
that's true. That's so
marketing
true.
to the family friend. I can do this. Like, your baby shouldn't be doing that. They're sleep deprived. They're doing this. You shouldn't be sleep deprived. It's even more important for a preterm infant to have better quality sleep, because then their brain will catch up in the cognitive development. I can only imagine the things this lady was saying to this friend. So I'm never going to cast aspersions upon the parent. I will always cast aspersions on the sleep trainers who use predatory marketing, and in this case, exploiting minors to market their products, to sell their courses, to vulnerable parents, right? So that is what happened here. And I'm outraged, because this is predatory marketing. Like, this is creating problems so that you can then
interesting, right?
Get people and get them to pay you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, go for it.
I mean, it's just because she went private. So she knew it wouldn't be well received by people who didn't agree with her.
Yeah.
So, like, it's not that she didn't know that there was potential, like, backlash coming her way.
Yeah.
You are right about the family. We don't know all the specifics. We don't know what they were told. We don't know how or why things happened. So that was unkind and unfair of me. I think more it speaks to the kind of my disillusionment of the fact that parents are not informed of the challenge and the level of distress that a child would experience being left with a stranger. And then, like, if you have to leave your child with a stranger or even with a friend or someone they know well for whatever reason, that's fine. But for that child to then not be responded to when they need love, connection, and care is mind-blowing. And the fact that, and maybe the parent didn't know it was happening, I don't know. But you're absolutely, I know, I'm just doing benefit of the doubt here, I don't know. But hopefully at least she got the permission of the parents, but either way it's still terrible.
Yeah,
it's still terrible. Like, I don't know, you're absolutely right. Like, and Michelle from At Babies and Brains talked, like, she had lots of things to say, but she and, like, mostly I agreed with them, but she talked about, like, she did a thing about how if a boyfriend filmed his girlfriend crying in a closet for 24 minutes while no one responded to her and then put it online, that would be abusive. That would be considered abuse. If 100. A teacher did that to a child, they would be fired. They would be charged. Like, it's just so
if you did
wild.
It to an animal, it would be considered animal abuse.
I completely agree with you. I don't know why this is okay and why there's perhaps, I'm curious to see, like, did she lose followers? Was there outrage?
I have a feeling she gained followers, because, like, the first time I checked, I think it was under 300,000. I could be wrong. It's just fucking insane. Like, I'm not okay with it. I'm not okay with the sleep training industry in general, and I've made that very clear. I have, like, a army of scientists who want to work on parental mental health and the consumption of social media, specifically around sleep information now. Like, we started it a couple of days ago, and we are growing. So we are on a mission to change this, because it's fucked. I want to be able to have legal recourse for people who use marketing tactics like this, because minor exploitation in this kind of form should never be allowed. Instagram needs to be told that this kind of thing is happening, that there is exploitation of minors on their app in the service of selling products, which is simultaneously, like, destroying mental health because it's giving false health information. Anyways, like, it's a
wild.
big,
absolutely wild.
Siobhan, we've only got about 5 minutes left. So what's your Fun Fact Friday?
Perfect. So before I share my Fun Fact Friday, I'm going to share the names of the women behind the Neurodivergent Women podcast, because I forgot to get them back to you. So it's Dr. Michelle Livock. She is a psychologist in Brisbane, in Queensland, as is Monique Mitchelson. Those are the ladies behind that, and it sounds very cool, and I'll definitely be giving it a listen. Thank you for your suggestion. And so when it comes to my Fun Fact Friday on whatever day we post this, who knows if it's a Friday, let's find out, is I've been looking into autism. So as those of you who know, Kristen has recently received an ASD diagnosis, so autism spectrum disorder. And it's a topic that I've always been interested in, even as a child. I don't meet the criteria myself, but my mum, as a speech therapist, has worked with lots of kids with autism. So I've always been interested in it. And I realized that I don't know much about the current research. It's basically autism tends to be an umbrella term. And there's lots we still don't know, but we're starting to learn more, and we can talk about it in a future episode. But basically, I learned that they have recently found an association between autism spectrum disorder and a mother's exposure to ozone pollution during the third trimester of pregnancy.
Wild. That is really interesting. Like, what is that? Does that mean that autism diagnoses are higher in places like China, where pollution is so extreme?
Perhaps.
Oh, interesting.
Perhaps.
Although, like, this does hark to the formula feeding and autism stuff that went around recently. I don't know if we talked about that on the pod, but I sure as hell ripped that person a new one on Instagram for trying to say that shorter breastfeeding lengths and more use of formula increase the risk of autism, because, guys, it's a neurodevelopmental disorder. It happens mostly in utero. It's very unlikely. It's more likely that autistic children have issues with breastfeeding and GI issues and things like that. But anyways.
And that's like, it's an issue of causation versus correlation versus causation. It doesn't increase the risk. It is associated with.
Yeah, it is present. They are both present at the same time, and there are multiple explanations for why it occurs. Yes.
And it's the fact that we haven't figured it out in the last 100 years. It's going to take us a long time to figure out what's going on. People are complicated.
We only just realized that, like, women were probably the majority of autistic sufferers, not the minority. Sufferers? I don't think sufferers is the right word. I don't really know.
Experiences.
Yeah. I don't know.
Anyway, all of this is a wonderful topic for maybe next week.
Yes, and maybe we'll talk about Heartbreak High on next week's topic as well.
Okay, I'll put that.
Did you watch it?
I watched it when I was a kid, the original version.
Yeah, no,
I have not started the new one, so that can be my homework.
Yeah, because Chloe Hayden, who is a person with autism, depicts a character with autism, and she does a fucking spectacular job. And it actually, like, illustrated a lot of things I experience in my life. And I was like, that's why I look like such a, like, resting bitch face when I'm, like, out to a cafe with my husband.
What's my excuse then?
Well, I mean, you're Siobhan, you know.
You're just a rat bag of a person.
Anyways, Siobhan, we are about to run out of time because our recording platform is ruthless. So I think that's all we've got time for. We'll catch you in the next one.
See you next time, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.